Hey, hi everybody, how are you? Doing good? Welcome, good morning. Hi guys. I want to start off, just kind of introduce yourselves. Let's talk a little bit about what you do in the industry, how you got into the industry, because what we're going to be focusing on is that there is no one method to approach this, esports in general. So let's go ahead, we'll just kind of go on down the line. So Nikita?
So I've just been a huge fan of esports for about 20 years now. I think Halo 2 was the first game that really got me into it, and watching MLG, staying up till like 4 in the morning to watch the tournaments, and just that kind of continued on, transition from Halo, Halo 3, StarCraft, and etc., and just loved it. Went into startups because obviously esports at the time was quite small and had that versatility, and I thought that kind of experience would serve me well. And it did in the end, because I ended up here and started working for ELC, which is the European branch of Allied Esports. So we're a global network with esports arenas and mobile esports arenas.
Very cool.
I work for ESL. ESL is quite a large company in esports. And I look after the UK office. And the reason we have offices around the world is that gaming is obviously quite cultural. There's a huge reach, but it's international at its heart. So in the UK, our main thing to do is try and drag as much international excitement into the UK, onto UK soil, but also really invigorate the local community as well, and help them build an ecosystem around that. So we become, as a country, and by the way, the 5th largest gaming market in the world, as important as possible. So we're kind of battling internally to who's the best all the time.
How many branches did you say there are total?
We have 11 around the world, and they started out as franchises right at the beginning. When I met ESL, it wasn't so large, in fact, back in 2012. In fact, the largest event they were really running was basically, if anyone had been to a show called CVIT, which is a channel show in Hanover, there's a massive hall with Intel in the front of it, and in there was ESL, and that was back in the day. And obviously since then it's grown at a very rapid rate, and we're seeing a lot more come into it. And I entered the market through the marketing route, so I was a born and bred gamer to a large degree. I actually came from that channel angle, and we were looking after companies like SteelSeries in the early days, and then we met ESL through lots of different connections.
Great, thank you. Alexander?
I'm working for StarLadder, leading this development, and literally in the last 17 years we do nothing else as organizing tournaments. So that was a nice word said in the previous panel, dinosaurs. So like ESL, we are kind of dinosaurs of the industry, and at that time probably the prize money was a box of beer, and that sounds funny right now, taking into account the international this August 25.5 million. So that's an incredible development, and for StarLadder, obviously, we were always intrigued to do truly global events. So qualifiers for our tournaments were taking place in every single part of this world, and that's probably a very nice attribute of esports. So you can do online qualifiers, and winners you can bring to some nice fancy places, and you do your finals in Brazil or in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I read that you guys have had finals all over the world. Very cool. Sergi?
Yeah, my name is Sergi. I am Sergi Mesonero. I'm co-founder of LVP. We have just landed in the UK, but we are pretty well known in the Spanish-speaking world. We are the #1 tournament organizer in the Spanish-speaking market. We have offices in many countries of Latin America, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia. And LVP started 10 years ago, so I'm surrounded by dinosaurs. I don't know if this makes us a bird or a mammal, not sure. But we have this a bit different approach to other tournament organizers, because we were since the beginning very focused not in building international circuits, But in building national markets or regional markets, we've been quite successful in Spain, being possibly not possibly, it's definitely the most sophisticated national market in Europe by far. And now we're trying to do the same in mostly Latin America, but here in the UK we have just landed. We are opening an office, and we will be running the national League of Legends competition for the next few years.
Oh wow! Congratulations. We do have the Slido app is open for questions. If you guys want to, if you have anything that you want to ask our panelists. We don't have anything coming in from audience yet, so I want to go ahead and roll into some of the stuff that we talked about beforehand. One of the first things that you guys mentioned that you just want to really dive into is the breadth of esports and where it is today, where it's gone, and kind of how each of your companies offer something completely different, but you've all managed to find a way to tap into this. So let's go ahead and start there.
For me?
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess for us, our focus, right, much younger than these guys. I think we're entering our second year really of operations, but we're very much focused on grassroots, and we think that's where the untapped potential is. Esports is very passion driven, and a lot of these companies were started by people who are just passionate about the industry, and they've done an incredible job. And you know, I'm a huge fan of their events, and we think now that we can come in and kind of cater to the fans who want to kind of experience that pro scene, that kind of pro environment, without necessarily being a pro or going to those sorts of events. And you know, we talk about the breadth, and we have something that's a mobile gaming arena, essentially a big truck that becomes a stage. And in my mind, I think that's something that can be complementary to a lot of what you guys do, because it offers something alternative, and it's an added experience to the great experiences you guys are already doing. And that kind of is our approach to the market. We don't think that it's saturated. We think there's still a lot of growth that can happen. And we think that by collaborating together, we can work together to grow that market.
The breadth is super important for us as well. I mean, we operate on this premise of path to pro. So what we know is that esports will become more and more successful as the talent becomes more successful. So in terms of players and on screen, but also people behind the scenes, of course, the unsung heroes, who like to call them, apparently. Which is nice.
He gets a point, I think, for being the first panelist to work the title of the panel.
We don't try and shout that. So really, in the process of that path to pro, we have to have a national reach, and we have to find an opportunity for any individual player to make it potentially to the top. But also, you know, find a certain level of that playing level, and maybe exit and actually say, you know, I'm never going to be at the top. What do they do then? And what we encourage and try and build an ecosystem around is actually finding opportunities for those people within the larger ecosystem, because, you know, we sort of joke internally around the fact that, you know, between our full-time on-screen talent and our league operations, those guys, literally their job is to play games, because they have to know everything inside. So players actually find themselves in these sorts of positions quite often, within production or producing or whatever. And I think that breadth is what builds the industry. You know, this pie is growing, and it's growing because leagues are getting bigger, but that breadth is getting bigger, and there's more games coming to market. So we have to continue to encourage that. So actually seeing different routes to market is extremely encouraging for the industry as a whole, because it's just building out this amazing opportunity for a multitude of different ideas, and this industry genuinely is just consistently evolving. You know, in the just 5 years I've been working directly with ESL, I've seen business models drastically change and move around. So I think that's what's important from our perspective.
Cool.
I completely agree. So I couldn't describe it better. Well, I would just like to add that the events which are bright and shiny are just a strawberry on the cake. Prior to those events, obviously you can draw it as a pyramid. You have always like amateur leagues, you have semi-professional, professional, and we like to call like the top stars, as we've seen on the panel before, top tier 1 teams, but obviously increasing and enhancing the market. We work, I think all of us work on developing the overall pyramid. So basically taking into consideration both amateur, semi-professional, professional parts of it, and just this will lead ultimately to the top-notch events.
Did we do that?
Yeah, this past couple of years, I mean, like, everybody has been, especially I think in the borders of the esports ecosystem, has been not really that, not that much the all tournament operators and so on, but everybody's been so obsessed in like finding the right way to do esports, and this has led mostly to the franchise leagues, which is it's one model, but in my opinion, I mean, there are so many different ways to approach esports, not only from a format point of view, but also, I mean, the titles, the way that you approach the amateurs versus professional divide. Regionally, there might be very big differences in culture that I think that James mentioned before. I mean, so for instance, ourselves, we have a very open vision about what esports are. The traditional sport metaphor has been very useful to try to explain esports to people that are not familiar with the term, but actually we try to go beyond that and find what makes esports different and specific. This may even think that different games, the format of the competition and the way it's presented can be totally different, and the way the events are set. So, in my opinion, there are different models and there will be always different models, because this ecosystem is so dynamic and it changes so much from day to day that I don't think there will never be a right way to approach sports, but different ways that can be very successful in different areas, games, regions, etc.
Okay. I have a question for you, Nikita. This is coming in from the audience, and I think that you're probably going to be one of the ones that this was aimed at. How economically viable are these open weekly competitions that have small prize money, small prize pools? They often seem like a money drain. Why would you choose to run those over focusing on larger competitions?
It's a really good question, and they hit the nail on the head. It is challenging. It is at times it's not a cash cow. Like, to be honest with you, completely honest. I think when we look at the tier 1 kind of pro events, if we jump into that, we're competing with ESL, and ESL have been doing it for so long and they're doing such a good job with it. We think that, and there's a lot of other companies that are also doing it. We have Faceit, for example, this weekend having their finals, and we think it's, especially in CSGO, I think it's saturated a little bit there, at least for the current size of the market, so it needs to grow organically. What we identified was that it's when it comes, sorry, I'm going to restart that just there, is that the passion is great, but what has ended up happening is that there are a lot of people who are trying to run events, because from the outside it looks very easy. It's a lot more challenging. So you have these small events which are not professional. That's what we want to bring in. So we want to bring that professionalism to the part of being pro, like you said, and that's amateur, semi-pro, small tournaments that allow people, if they're at uni and they want to play competitively, well, they have a good team, they want to see how they match up nationally. They don't need to make a full-time living from it, but it's nice to offer something there. And I think the challenge is less about the events being flawed. It's more about the market that needs to grow. It's the sponsors that need to understand the value that those events offer, and how do we leverage that.
I think that's an industry-wide problem, is actually that value of sponsorship and what esports, the esports community and the engagement there. I mean, we have amazing examples which we've showed in the past when non-endemic sponsors have come into space and people are chanting the logo on the screen because of that engagement. But still, if we look at an industry as a whole, we're kind of monetizing these viewers around £4 a year. Whereas if you compare that to sort of £35 from a traditional sports market, there's kind of a gap there to kind of an opportunity, we should say. So I think once we'll see, I mean, we'll all struggle it's a struggle for us all to monetize those events, but as time goes on, what we're seeing is that the stakeholders are getting more serious, and obviously the budgets are increasing, which gives us an opportunity to get more creative, but that breadth then increases, because absolutely, I mean, esports started from the community level, so it was literally someone's dream once, 10 years ago, to have a truck that goes across Europe that turns into a big esports stage, right? So it's just a natural progression in that way, and I see that year on year we're monetizing the viewership in a much better way through sponsorships, ticket sales, merchandising, digital merchandise as well, very important, and obviously the game publishers see that directly in that respect as well. So it's about the whole ecosystem building up.
So it seems like that's kind of, it's already rolling into a question that we just got. We've already kind of opened the topic to it, is do you see esports developing in a similar way to traditional sports? Can you see major esports tournaments being broadcast on mainstream television, for example? It seems like your answer to the first half of that question is no, it doesn't follow the same pattern as traditional sports, because you've got to pull, like we were talking about, you've got to pull bits and pieces kind of from everything. I think it was you that I mentioned it, that you have to pull from broadcasting, you have to pull from traditional sports, you have to pull from video games and entertainment.
Yeah, there are synergies, and we borrow from those industries' ideas, and obviously those industries are also interested in esports to get into. But if you look at the original business model in broadcast, for example, or even sports, let's say they worked on very much about selling media rights on a regional basis. Well, automatically, esports can't do that from its premise, because it's free on Twitch, or Facebook, or Twitter, or whatever, or Mixer. So what's really, really important is that those revenue models are defined clearly, and we see that through different ways in which, in effect, the consumer is compensated for the time they put into playing the tournament, and we have some sort of operational budget to execute it. So it's kind of a constant balance between that aspect. And
so, in the sense of the second half of that question, with major esports being broadcast on mainstream television, do you guys see, because I feel like you guys kind of all represent individual aspects of the market, do you see it for some games, not others? Do you see it that it's going to be like a blended thing where you have maybe like a Madden tournament being broadcast before the Super Bowl or something like that? How do you see that actually blending in?
There is no straight border between live streaming on Twitch or live streaming arm of any TV channel. So what TV channels are aiming, they want to provide their viewers with the best possible content or most interesting content. And now when esports audience gets mature, that's exactly the content what they need. So I clearly see esports being on TV just because they need to please their audience, otherwise they will simply lose the entire audience towards Twitch or Facebook. So they need to react, TV channels. So there are some probably game titles which will not come soon to traditional TV, like for example in Germany, there is like age restriction for Counter-Strike, which allows to be broadcasted only after 9 p.m. But there are plenty of other esports titles which could. So I clearly see esports being on TV in the future. But very important point is exactly what James mentioned, monetizing. And major revenue source right now is sponsorship sales. So that's not licensing. We need to differentiate while matching esports being on TV or licensing esports to TV channels. Because I think I'm right saying that NFL collects $7 billion per year in licensing fees. We don't yet. So TV channels are not ready to buy those licenses yet, exactly because the content is available for free on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. But back to your previous question regarding room for different types of tournaments or different magnitudes of tournaments, because also weekly tournaments are monetized in the same way by the means of sponsorship sales. And obviously, for larger tournaments, sponsorship packs are more expensive. For weekly tournaments, they are less expensive, and that's good because the point of entry for new sponsors who would like to explore esports as marketing channel is obviously lower and more affordable, and that's why there is definitely huge necessity in different types and magnitudes of tournaments.
And it can be regionally targeted.
Exactly.
I also think like when you're looking, we touched on traditional sports, but you're looking at those weekly tournaments. If you look at football, there's so many different leagues. There's so many, you have five-a-side, you have cities five-a-side, you have friends who are happy to sign up and compete against other friends in the tournament, not because they think they're going to win, but because they want to utilize the pitch. You have amateur, you have under 14, under 21, etc., etc. And we haven't gone to that point yet. I think it's easy for people who love gaming to look at esports, and Complexity was saying they've been in 20 years, Fnatic, Patrick was saying he's been playing since 1999. But I think esports around 2010, 2011 hit a different step in that kind of phase 2, but still quite young. Football has been around for, actually I have no idea, but a long time. But rugby for a long time, and it's taken them a while to get to this point. And esports has had like such a rapid growth, but it's also only been at the very most like 20, 25 years. Like we're getting there.
We're still on the steep.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember though also that on the flip side, traditional sports are actually going towards the digital platforms. So we saw the Facebook deal with the Liga in India, for example. So actually there's a kind of convergence as well as a kind of a swap of ideas.
So we were about right at around 5 minutes left on the panel, so I want to kind of do some maybe rapid fire hot takes from you guys, because there's some really cool kind of questions coming in from the audience that are all over the place, but all really valuable to what we're talking about. The first one is, could you guys comment on whether you feel franchising is inevitable in esports?
I think a form of franchising is inevitable, but I don't think it needs to be wholesale, just adopted from like the NFL and just applied, because like these guys have highlighted, what makes it successful is not necessarily what will work for esports, and we've got to understand what works for the person.
There needs to be a balance from my side. So a game will start out, the viewership will build up. Once the community is large enough, then the game developer will consider what sort of model works for them. But we would always encourage that the game publisher will consider a more open view to that, which may include some franchising, but also a much wider thing, because at the end of the day, it needs to be accessible from the very low levels of the community.
So as tournament organizer, we are probably indifferent to whether there would be a franchising model or an open-end esports ecosystem where we are allowed to organize world tournaments, because even in the franchising model, we are being hired by label in order to organize those tournaments. So regardless of which model you are talking about, tournament organizers are always involved in. And but still, we think, but again, saying this, we are very biased. We think that open-end ecosystem has a probably better potential to increase player base, because restricting building teams and playing in one single league, you ultimately restrict competitive gaming, and this might lead to lower growth in player base. So I think that open-end esports ecosystem might be better if the ultimate goal is bigger player base.
I agree, but also I think that definitely not. And there's something that people never contemplate when talking about franchising, which is that it's a model that it's very, very long-term oriented. And I'm totally unable to say if in 2 years' time, number 1 and number 2 games played right now are still going to be those, the same games. So franchising, it's a way to, especially for publishers, to bring money from the future to the present via making teams and their investors pay a huge amount. And for teams it's extremely risky because they are putting a lot of faith that this competition is going to run for a long time. If it's not running for a long time, if it's not successful, in 10 years' time, because we're talking about a lot of money, I mean, they'll probably have, that investment will probably be lost. Okay? So I'm totally unable to say, which games are going to be popular in 2 years' time, 3 years' time. I'm not talking about, not even 5 or 6 or 10, which is the term in which you could recoup the investment. So definitely not.
May I just add as well, it's a really good point. And if you look at a lot of businesses in esports, it's super important that we remember that the number of gamers in the world is going up and the number of esports viewers in the world is going up. Absolutely true, we don't know what game will have that longevity. We have good ideas and there's obviously an aspiration with game developers to do that. But it's super important that our business models remain agnostic to that game. So actually, ESL 1 is a product that ESL has produced that isn't reliant on a particular game necessarily. We could rotate around any different games, and I think that's super important to remember in this industry.
Well, I think that might be time. Is that time? Alrighty, that's it then. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, audience. If you guys have any more questions,